Coming home after surgery, I expected quiet and care, maybe some warmth, but what I found was a chill deeper than the winter night. The people I loved looked through me like I was a stranger, and a simple request became a battle I hadn't seen coming. This story is about losing everything familiar and finding the strength to take it back, piece by painful piece. If you're ready to witness a journey from silence to standing tall, stay with me. Before we begin, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share where you're watching from in the comments. I want to hear your voice too. After a funeral, I told Brandon and his new wife Michelle that the house was theirs. It was the same two-story home Esther and I had worked our entire lives to afford, nestled in a quiet neighborhood we chose for its maple trees and silence. Brandon had just been laid off and was struggling to find work. Michelle was juggling side gigs and a mounting credit card balance, and they were living in a cramped one-bedroom rental. Giving them the house felt right. I told myself it was the kind of thing a good father does, builds something, then gives it away to help the next generation start stronger. I kept one room upstairs for myself and asked for nothing in return but a promise. When I got older and needed help, they'd be there. No contracts, no terms. Just trust. And for a while, I believed that trust meant something. Then came the surgery. I'd been having stomach pain for months, which turned out to be a problem with my colon. The doctors scheduled an operation, warned me recovery would be rough, but assured me I'd pull through. I spent 6 days in the hospital. 6 days of 4 drips, groggy mornings, the beep of machines reminding me how fragile a body becomes with age. I didn't expect balloons or banners when I came home, but I expected kindness. A little warmth. A soft place to land. Brandon picked me up at noon. He was 20 minutes late and didn't say a word as he helped me into the car. I was wearing loose sweatpants and a button-up shirt that took me 10 minutes to put on with shaking hands. He said, "You good?" as he closed the passenger door, like he was asking about a car, not a father. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the lawn overgrown, the flower beds gone. Esther's favorite roses, the ones she planted in memory of her mother, were replaced by gravel. The angel statue she loved to dust every Sunday, gone. Michelle opened the door while texting and said, "You're back already?" before disappearing into the kitchen. I stood there for a moment in the entryway, looking around at the house I used to know. It smelled different, synthetic sharp. The family pictures on the wall had changed too. No more black and white wedding photos. No more baby pictures of Brandon. Now it was all them, Brandon and Michelle, smiling on vacation, posing with their dog, drinking wine. I shuffled to my recliner, the only chair they hadn't replaced. My stitches pulled with every step. I sank down slowly, one hand on my abdomen. My throat was dry. I hadn't had water since the ride home, and the meds were making me dizzy. I looked toward the kitchen and said, "Michelle, could I trouble you for a glass of water?" She didn't even look at me. Her hands were busy unpacking groceries. "Are you serious?" she said. "I'm not your nurse." I blinked, confused. "I just got out of the hospital." She turned around then, holding a box of cereal, and added, "Well, you're here now, aren't you?" Brandon sat on the couch watching TV. "You're walking just fine," he said. "You can get it yourself." I didn't respond. I wanted to believe they were joking. I waited for Michelle to laugh, for Brandon to smile and say, "Just messing with you, Dad." But nothing came, only silence, and that TV, and the sound of a plastic grocery bag being crumpled like my dignity. I tried to stand. The pain hit me like a sharp knife dragging across my gut. My knees buckled slightly. I gritted my teeth and leaned on the armrest. With slow, deliberate steps, I walked to the kitchen sink. Every breath felt like lifting a cinder block. My hand trembled as I filled the glass. The water was cool, but it tasted sour. I turned and looked at them. My son, who used to climb into my lap when thunder scared him, and the woman he married, who once called me dad, with what I thought was sincerity. Now they looked through me like I was just another bill that came in the mail. I returned to my chair, heart pounding, body aching, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a ghost inside my own home. That evening, they ordered dinner, Chinese takeout. Michelle joked, "Don't tell Walter or he'll want chopsticks and hand service." Brandon laughed. "He'll probably want us to pre-chew it too." I sat upstairs, listening through the air vent, gripping the sheets with fingers that remembered the day I signed the house over. The attorney, Lisa Holbrook, had said, "Do you want to build in conditions?" I told her no. "They're family," I said. He walked right past my door without knocking, without checking if I needed anything. Just a faint smell of cologne and the jingle of car keys fading away. The front door slammed. Then silence. No footsteps. No one came up to see if I'd made it through the night. I sat up slowly, biting my bottom lip as a bolt of pain laced through my side. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and rested for a long minute before standing. When I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the house was still except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Michelle's voice echoed faintly from the living room, talking loudly into her phone about a return order or a promo code that didn't apply. As I reached the stairs, I took each step one at a time, gripping the handrail tightly, the old wood creaking under my palm. The smell of coffee teased the air, and my stomach turned, not from hunger, but from knowing that none of that was for me. In the kitchen, Michelle stood barefoot in a silk robe, holding her coffee cup like a queen surveying her kingdom. I stepped in slowly, leaning against the counter, and said, "Morning." She glanced over her shoulder. "You should have told me you were coming down. I would have made sure you didn't fall." There was no concern in her voice, just sarcasm thinly veiled as civility. I asked if there was anything soft to eat, maybe some oatmeal or toast. She turned toward the pantry, pulled down a box of instant noodles, and sat on the counter without a word. I looked at it, then at her, hoping for clarification. "You know how to use the kettle, right?" she said flatly. I nodded, though my hands were still shaky and my legs barely stable. She returned her phone call, laughing at something the person on the other end said. I opened the drawer, pulled out a saucepan, and stood at the stove, waiting for water to boil, leaning heavily on the counter to stay upright. It felt like a marathon. The steam fogged my glasses. I stirred the noodles slowly, the ache in my side flaring with every motion. When it was done, I took the bowl to the table and sat down alone, watching Michelle scroll her phone while sipping from her mug like nothing had happened. I didn't finish the food. My stomach rebelled at the first bite. It tasted like rubber and regret. I stood up, carried the bowl to the sink, and emptied it, rinsing it slowly, hoping Michelle might notice the effort I was putting in just to clean up after myself. She didn't. Later that afternoon, I tried to lie down in the recliner and watch the news. Brandon came home and dropped his work bag on the floor with a loud thud, startling me awake. "This thing's always in the way," he muttered, referring to the recliner, before walking into the kitchen and popping open a soda. I sat up slowly, adjusting the blanket on my lap. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't ask if I'd eaten, just sat on the couch and turned on the television, blasting the volume. When I asked if we could turn it down a notch, just a little, he grabbed the remote and clicked it up 2 more notches. "Maybe your hearing's going too," he said, not even looking at me. Michelle chuckled from the hallway. "He's just old. Don't take it personally." That night, I took my pills without food because no one had asked if I needed dinner, and I didn't have the strength to make something myself. I lay in bed again, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding more from sorrow than from strain. I could still hear their voices downstairs, muffled and distant, but close enough to know I wasn't being included in any conversation that mattered. At some point, I got up, opened the drawer where I kept my paperwork, and began thumbing through the pages again. The deed transfer was clear. No rent. Full ownership had gone to Brandon, but only under the condition of residence and care. Lisa Holbrook had suggested that clause. It's not about money, Walter, she'd said. It's about respect. You can't force love, but you can protect yourself from becoming invisible. I hadn't understood her then. I did now. The next morning, I stayed in bed longer, waiting to see if anyone would check on me. No one did. At 10 o'clock, I pulled myself out of bed, made my way downstairs, and found Brandon eating a breakfast sandwich. He looked up from his plate and said, "We were going to bring you something, but figured you'd sleep till noon." Michelle said, "We're not mind readers, you know. If you want something, say it." I said I was still having trouble with my digestion. Michelle sighed loudly and said, "There's crackers in the cabinet." The tone wasn't one of care. It was a dismissal, a chore, something between babysitting and pest control. That afternoon, they watched a movie on the couch while I tried to read in my room. But the volume was so loud I could hear every explosion, every laugh track, every one-liner. At one point, Brandon paused it and yelled up the stairs, "Hey, are you okay up there? Or did you fall asleep with your eyes open again?" Downstairs, I could hear the clatter of Michelle's slippers, the brief hiss of the coffee maker, and Brandon's voice complaining about something trivial. Maybe the internet speed, maybe the eggs. The same way they talked every morning, as if the house was theirs alone, as if I wasn't even under the same roof. After the past 2 days of silence, mockery, and blatant neglect, I no longer felt shocked by it. What surprised me more was how quickly the shock had been replaced by something else. Acceptance? No, something harder, sharper. Awareness. A final understanding that I had built my own prison, handed them the keys, and walked inside willingly. I pushed myself to my feet and crossed the room slowly. Every step still hurt, but pain was starting to feel like an old friend, predictable, almost trustworthy. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out the small black folder I hadn't touched in over 4 years. It was thinner than I remembered. Inside were the house deed, a photocopy of the transfer form, and a business card of the attorney I had used when I handed the house over to Brandon. Her name was Lisa Holbrook, a calm, methodical woman who specialized in family property transfers. She'd been the only one who raised questions about my decision at the time. "Walter," she had said, her voice measured but concerned, "you're sure you don't want to place any restrictions or clauses in this agreement? There are ways to ensure protection if circumstances change." I had waved her off then, eager to finish the paperwork and let Brandon and Michelle move in. I thought unconditional generosity was the highest form of love. I didn't want my son to feel like I was holding anything over his head. Now, that same blind generosity felt like the rope I had handed them to tie me down. I turned the card over in my hand, staring at the number on the back. I hadn't spoken to Lisa since the day she finalized the deed transfer, and I wasn't sure she'd even remember me. But I remembered her, and I remembered her warning. I looked at the clock on the wall. 8:26 a.m. I took a breath, picked up the phone, and dialed. It rang twice before she answered. "Lisa Holbrook," she said, her voice just as calm as I remembered. "Lisa, this is Walter Granger," I said, my voice hoarse from both sleep and hesitation. "You handled a property transfer for me a few years back." There was a brief pause, then a polite, professional warmth returned to her tone. "Mr. Granger, of course. I remember. You transferred your residence to your son, Brandon. Is everything all right?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "Everything's not all right." I spent the next 15 minutes explaining, slowly and clearly, everything that had happened since I got home from the hospital. I left out nothing. The dismissal, the refusal to help, the mocking, The subtle gaslighting that made me question if I was being overly sensitive until I remembered the look in Michelle's eyes every time she tossed me a careless insult. Lisa didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, there was a silence on the line, not empty, but thoughtful. Then she said, "I'd like to see the original paperwork. Do you still have a copy of the deed transfer agreement?" "Yes," I said. "I have it in front of me now." "Read me the heading of Section 4, she said. I flipped to the second page and began reading aloud the legalese that had once felt like decoration on a generous act. Halfway through, Lisa stopped me. "That's what I thought," she said. "I built a conditional clause into the agreement. At your request, I left it very subtle. It's under the care and residence provision, which essentially states that if the original grantor, that's you, becomes a resident again due to age or health, and the grantees, that's Brandon and Michelle, failed to provide basic care or supportive residence, the ownership can be legally reviewed and, under certain circumstances, reverted." I sat in stunned silence. "You're telling me I still have rights to the house?" "I'm telling you it's not as one-sided as you might have assumed. The wording leaves the door open, especially given the current situation. But we need to act carefully. This is still family law, which means it can get emotional and complicated fast." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What's the first step?" "Documentation," she said firmly. "You'll need to keep a detailed record of every act of neglect, disrespect, or violation of reasonable care. Conversations, dates, behavior. Anything that demonstrates they've failed the implied agreement of caring for you while you're in their household. Start today." I looked out the window. Brandon's car was gone, probably at the gym or driving somewhere aimlessly. Michelle was still downstairs, likely watching TV in her robe, laughing at daytime nonsense while I stood up here trying to figure out how to reclaim the life I had handed away. "Okay," I said. "I'll start documenting everything." "And Walter," Lisa added, her voice softening slightly, "don't wait too long. The law is on your side right now, but time favors the ones who act." After we hung up, I placed the phone down gently and sat on the edge of the bed again, staring at the papers in my hand like they had just changed weight. They felt heavier now, real, useful. I wasn't just an old man in a room anymore. I was a man with a plan. I knew what I needed to do, and I knew who I was dealing with. I might have underestimated them before, but I wouldn't make that mistake again. That afternoon, when Michelle passed me in the hallway and said, "You should really try to shower more," the ink bled slightly on some pages, either from the shaking in my hands or the pressure I applied while writing. I wasn't just recording events. I was chiseling them into evidence bit by bit for a case that wasn't just about legal ownership anymore. It was about dignity. Lisa had been clear. I needed to gather everything without alerting them. If Brandon or Michelle sensed what I was doing, they could manipulate the narrative. They'd already done it before, telling the police I was just recovering slowly when neighbors asked why I didn't come outside. And if they knew I had rights, real legal ground to reclaim the house, they tried to flip the script faster than you could blink. So I kept my mouth shut, smiled when I had to, and listened more than I spoke. That morning, I sat at the dining table, slowly eating toast Michelle had tossed on a plate and slid across the surface like she was feeding a dog. I thanked her anyway. She didn't respond. Brandon came in 15 minutes later, yawning and scratching his stomach, still in sweatpants, and went straight for the fridge. "You didn't make coffee?" he asked Michelle. She rolled her eyes. "I've been up for hours." "Well, so has he said, nodding toward me. "But I don't see him brewing a pot either." Michelle smirked. "I think he's waiting for someone to spoon feed him." I looked down at my plate and didn't say a word, just memorized the exchange. I finished eating, rinsed the plate, and walked slowly back to my room. Once there, I pulled out the notebook, turned to a fresh page, and logged the time, date, and both of their statements. I labeled it clearly. Morning exchange, March 28th, disparaging remarks plus implied refusal of basic courtesy. The tone wasn't angry. It was professional. I knew how to build a case the same way I'd build a foundation, with structure, discipline, and a clear end in mind. Around noon, I pretended to nap in the living room while they watched a cooking show and argued over which one of them had ordered the wrong groceries online. Brandon stormed out for a drive, and Michelle lit a scented candle so strong it made my eyes water. I coughed once, then twice, louder on purpose. "Oh, come on," she snapped. "It's lavender, not smoke. You're so sensitive." I made a note of that, too. After she left the room, I carefully placed my phone on the coffee table and pressed record. I didn't say a word. I just let it run for 45 minutes. I captured the sounds of her cursing at the delivery guy through the Ring doorbell, the moment she yelled, "You guys deliver trash," and the stomping back into the kitchen. Later, I labeled the file Verbal Aggression March 28th afternoon. The sound wasn't directed at me, but Lisa had told me it could help establish pattern. People don't change how they treat others just for one person. When Brandon returned, he immediately asked where his charger was, then turned to me. "Did you take it? You've been snooping around again." I blinked. "I don't go in your room, Brandon." He scoffed. "Well, someone did. It didn't just grow legs." Michelle chimed in from the hallway. "You sure you didn't move it and forget? You've been doing that a lot lately." There was again the suggestion that I was slipping, confused, mentally unfit. I didn't react. I simply nodded and went upstairs to write. Evening accusation implied cognitive decline, no justification or apology. The entries were piling up. By day's end, I'd filled 9 pages. I added one more before bed when Michelle banged on the bathroom door and shouted, "Don't use up all the hot water again." I hadn't even turned on the tap yet. The next day, I installed a small voice recorder, one I had bought years ago to capture lectures at a community college class I took on aging and legacy writing. I placed it in my bedroom vent. Nothing high-tech, just basic. Enough to catch the ambient remarks they made when they assumed I couldn't hear. That afternoon, Brandon said to Michelle, "He's been quieter lately. Maybe he's finally realized this isn't his place anymore." Michelle replied, "He should be thankful we're even letting him stay here." Click. Save. Label. Private Remarks March 29th Awareness of intent to diminish ownership perception. These weren't just insults. They were statements of belief. They truly thought they had taken the house and everything it meant away from me. But what they didn't realize was that I had left the door cracked when I gave it to them. And now I was walking back through it with facts. On March 30th, I tested something small. I waited until Michelle was in the kitchen and said, "Would you mind helping me carry this laundry basket upstairs? It's too heavy with my stitches." She looked at me like I'd asked her to carry a log. "It's one flight," she said. "You'll be fine." I said nothing. I waited. Brandon entered a few minutes later. "Need something? Just a basket, if you don't mind." "Ask Michelle," he said. "She's not doing anything. I'll let it sit." I didn't push. I carried the basket myself, slowly and with more pain than I admitted, then went upstairs and added another note. I labeled this one Physical Task Denial Recovery Interference. Every interaction was a brick in the wall I was building, not to shut them out, but to hold them accountable. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I backed up all my recordings to a flash drive I kept hidden inside an old shoebox under my bed. I reviewed the entries I had logged the previous night and added a few annotations. Brandon had made another snide comment about how some people think they're entitled to royal treatment just because they had surgery, and Michelle had laughed a little too loudly at a joke about retirement homes. I kept it all. I kept everything. Lisa's instructions echoed in my mind. Don't react. Don't argue. document and observe. But something shifted that day, something different in the air. I noticed it during breakfast. Michelle served herself pancakes with whipped cream and blueberries, posted a photo to her social media, and then walked out of the kitchen without a word. Nothing was left on the table for me. Brandon poured himself a cup of coffee, took a bite of bacon, and said over his shoulder, "If you want something, there's cereal. You know where it is." The tone wasn't even mocking anymore. It was dismissive, mechanical, like I was a machine they'd grown tired of maintaining. I got up, moved slowly, and opened the pantry. No cereal. I looked back at Brandon. "There's no cereal." He shrugged. "Then maybe you should add it to the list." Or, "Is that too much responsibility?" Michelle reappeared with her phone in hand and said, "Maybe we should get him one of those delivery subscriptions. You know, for the elderly." I didn't flinch. I just made my way to the table with a glass of water and a slice of bread. Dry, cracked, and plain. Later that afternoon, I asked if Brandon could drive me to the pharmacy to refill one of my prescriptions. He rolled his eyes and said, "Can't you order that stuff online?" I told him I didn't have the app, and the last time I tried, the payment didn't go through. "I'm not your secretary," he snapped, then left the house. I sat in the living room, blinking at the wall, my heart racing with a mix of humiliation and helplessness. By the time he returned, I was upstairs resting, trying to steady my breathing. That evening, after dinner, which I made myself from a can of soup I had hidden behind the flour in the pantry, I mentioned I'd be speaking with my lawyer soon to review some financial documents. I said it casually, not directly accusing or confronting, just enough to let it float into the air like the scent of something burning just out of sight. Brandon's face darkened. "Why are you talking to a lawyer?" he asked. I shrugged, just tying up a few loose ends. "You know, end of life planning. Estate stuff." Michelle sat up straighter. "Is this about the house?" she asked. I looked her in the eyes. "Not unless it needs to be." Her jaw tightened. "You're trying to take it back." "I'm trying to protect myself," I said. "From what?" Brandon demanded. "From being treated like a burden in a home I built with my own hands." I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I stood up slowly, the tension in the room thick like a storm about to break. I walked upstairs, closed the door to my room, and sat on the bed, waiting for the fallout. It came faster than I expected. 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps outside my room. Then the unmistakable sound of the door lock clicking from the outside. I stood, limped to the knob, and turned it. It didn't budge. I jiggled it again. Nothing. I knocked. Brandon. I called. Michelle. No answer. I knocked harder. Still nothing. Panic settled into my stomach like a stone. I pounded once more, louder. "This isn't funny," I yelled. Still silence. I reached for my phone in my pocket, gone. I looked around the room. No landline. No charger. My tablet had been moved. I checked the drawer where I kept the notebook and the flash drive. Empty. They'd taken it. All of it. I sank to the floor, breath shallow, heart racing. For several minutes, I just sat there, trying to calm the storm rising inside me. I looked at the window. I could open it, maybe climb out, but it was a second-story drop, and my body wasn't ready for that. My stitches still ached when I stood too fast. Then I saw movement outside. In the backyard, my neighbor, Joshua Palmer, was coiling a garden hose. Joshua, retired firefighter, quiet man, good neighbor. I pushed the window open and called his name. He looked around, startled, then up at me. "Joshua," I said, "I need help. They've locked me in my room." His eyes widened. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said, "but they took my phone. I need you to call the police." He didn't hesitate. "Hold tight," he said. "Help is on the way." I closed the window, backed away, and stared at the door again. My hands were shaking. The police arrived 10 minutes later. I heard the knock at the door, the shuffle of footsteps, and then Michelle's voice, calm, sweet, innocent. "Oh, officers, there must be a mistake." I pounded on the door from inside. I'm in here, I yelled. They locked me in. One of the officers heard me and demanded the door be opened. Brandon fiddled with the lock, and when it swung open, I saw the look of calculated innocence vanish from Michelle's face. He's been confused since the surgery, she told the officers. Sometimes he locks himself in by accident. They took my phone, I said, holding out my empty hands. They took my things. One officer looked at Michelle. Did you? No, she said quickly. We found on the counter, Brandon added. We were charging it for him. I looked at them, two practiced liars who had rehearsed this play together. I looked at the officer who had walked upstairs and simply said, I want my lawyer, and I want them out of this house. He nodded, made a few notes, and asked more questions. Brandon and Michelle had played their parts perfectly, with soft voices and wide eyes, casting doubt over every word I said. When I told the officers they had locked me in my room, Brandon laughed it off, saying the door sometimes stuck and I must have panicked. Michelle feigned concern, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder and cooing, Dad, you've been under so much stress. This isn't good for your recovery. One of the officers gently asked if I had been feeling confused lately or if perhaps I had forgotten to take medication. I could feel the moment slipping away, feel the weight of their carefully rehearsed manipulation dragging down every truth I try to offer. I explained that I had a legal agreement, a clause in the deed that allowed for reversion if they failed to provide basic care, that I had documents, recordings, notes, but when asked to show them, I had nothing. My notebook was gone, my flash drive missing, my tablet nowhere in sight. I knew they had taken them, hidden them, maybe even destroyed them, but without proof, it was my word against theirs. And they had done everything in their power to paint me as unstable. The officers said they couldn't verify a crime had occurred, and although they didn't stop me from calling my lawyer, they didn't remove Brandon and Michelle from the house either. They left me with a quiet warning. Mr. Granger, if you feel unsafe again, please don't hesitate to call. But we can't take action without concrete evidence. As soon as they stepped out the door, the atmosphere shifted. Michelle's polite mask dropped first. She slammed the door and turned to me with venom in her eyes. That was really stupid, Walter, she hissed. What exactly were you trying to prove? Brandon stood nearby, his arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Calling the cops on your own family? Do you have any idea how that makes you look? I'm not confused, I said quietly. You locked me in and you took my things. We didn't take anything, Michelle snapped. You're paranoid. Honestly, I think those pain meds are messing with your head. You need to stop this before you make things worse, Brandon added. We're trying to help you, and all you do is throw accusations. I tried to speak again, but Michelle raised her hand. You're lucky we don't press charges for harassment. You yelled out the window like a lunatic. What would the neighbors think? I looked at her and saw not a daughter-in-law, not even a person, but a wall, cold, flat, unmoving. I want my things back, I said. My notebook, my recordings, my documents. What notebook? She replied with a shrug. You must have misplaced it. If you can't remember where you put it, Brandon chimed in, maybe it's time we start talking about assisted living. The words hit me like a slap, not because of what they meant, but because I could see in his face that he believed he had won, that he was in control, that I was cornered, that I had nothing left. I didn't argue. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and sat quietly. I stayed awake for hours, waiting to see if they would try to take something else, but nothing happened. They didn't need to do more. The message had been sent. I was being watched, monitored, measured for weakness. But what they didn't know was that I still had Lisa. I still had Joshua. And most importantly, I still had clarity. The next morning, I made my way to the backyard slowly, feigning a desire for fresh air. Joshua was watering his plants. When he saw me, he came over immediately. You okay? He asked. You looked shaken last night. I need a favor, I whispered. Can you write down everything you saw and heard last night? Exact times, exact words if you remember. He nodded. Of course. I already started. I'll print it out for you. And I added, can you hold on to it for now? If they find it, they'll destroy it. He hesitated, then said, of course. Whatever you need, Walter. When I returned inside, Michelle glanced up from her phone and asked, where have you been? Just getting some sun, I said. You shouldn't push yourself, she said flatly. Stress isn't good for your condition. Brandon entered the room a moment later, holding a folder. We've been thinking, he said. You might need help managing things. Maybe give us power of attorney, just to help with the bills and appointments. I stared at him. No, it would make things easier, he insisted. For everyone. No, I repeated. That's not going to happen. His jaw tensed, but he didn't press. Not right away. That afternoon, I called Lisa again. I told her everything. The gaslighting, the police visit, the missing documents. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, they're escalating. That means they're scared. I don't have my notes anymore, I said. Start again, she replied. From memory, and get a new recorder. Hide it better this time. Walter, they're trying to build a case that you're incompetent. You have to stay ahead of them. I have a witness, I told her. Joshua Palmer. He saw and heard everything. Perfect, she said. Have him write it down. We'll use that as a base. That night, I kept my door unlocked, not because I trusted them, but because I wanted them to think I had given up. I heard them talking downstairs, their voices muffled but sharp. That envelope, freshly typed, freshly remembered, was my new foundation. And I had no intention of letting it slip from my grasp again. I took another deep breath and dialed Lisa. I need to move forward, I told her. They're trying to take everything from me, Lisa, my home, my voice, my mind. But I'm not done yet, and I'm done playing defense. Her voice was calm and firm, the voice of someone who dealt with bullies wearing family faces before. You ready to make your move? She asked. I am, I said. I want to initiate the reversion clause. I want them out. Then we begin today, she said. I've already drafted the documents. We'll need your signature, and we'll need to show that your care needs have been neglected consistently. I've got 9 new pages of testimony, I said. I'll get them notarized. Good, she said. We'll also need a witness to corroborate. I have one. Joshua Palmer. He's already written his statement. He saw them lock me in. He heard them lie to the police. Lisa paused, then said, then we have everything we need to file the petition. Once it's submitted, they'll receive formal notice, and they won't be able to tamper with the process once it's in motion. That afternoon, I walked next door under the pretense of asking Joshua for guarding advice, and he handed me a manila envelope discreetly while we stood near his porch. Everything you asked for, he said. And Walter, you're not crazy. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Thank you, I said, gripping the envelope like it was oxygen. With his written account and my new affidavit, I scheduled an appointment at the county courthouse for the next morning. I didn't tell Brandon. I didn't tell Michelle. But I could feel a new chill in the house, as if they sensed the power slipping from their fingers. That night, Brandon knocked on my door, his tone fake sweet. Hey, Dad. We were talking, and we think it might be good to take a little trip, just to clear the air. What do you say we take you to a nice resort out in the country? You could get some rest. We'll handle everything. I looked at him, then said flatly, You mean a nursing facility, don't you? He blinked. No, I mean, you want to ship me out, bury the mess, erase the problem. His expression hardened. You're being paranoid again. You've been under a lot of stress. I'm fine, I said, and I'm not going anywhere. But you two might want to pack your bags soon. His mouth twitched, confusion mixing with frustration. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out soon enough. Michelle stormed in behind him. What are you scheming, Walter? She snapped. We've been nothing but patient with you. Patient, I said, standing up slowly. You stole my property, mocked my health, and tried to erase my memories. You don't get to use that word. You've lost it, she spat. You're mentally unfit. We have every right to seek guardianship at this point. Try it, I said. Let's see what the court thinks when they read the care clause you ignored and the witness testimony you forgot about. Her face went pale, and Brandon stepped forward. You wouldn't. Already have, I said. The documents will be filed tomorrow morning. Silence filled the room. Michelle's fist clenched. Brandon's jaw moved like he was chewing air. I walked past him slowly, not rushing, not afraid. I had felt powerless for so long, but now the tide was turning. I had my strength back, not in my body, but in my proof, my clarity, my preparation. I spent the rest of the evening preparing my clothes, making copies of everything, hiding backup documents with Joshua just in case, and charging the burner phone Lisa had mailed me the week before for emergencies. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without fear of the door clicking shut from the outside. The next morning, I left the house before sunrise. I didn't eat. I didn't wait for their judgmental stares. I took a taxi to the courthouse and met Lisa on the steps, a thick folder in her arms and determination in her walk. She wore a navy blue suit, not a single wrinkle, and handed me the papers with calm authority. We file this, she said, and within 7 days, they'll be summoned for a hearing. If the judge agrees that neglect and psychological harm occurred under the same roof you gave them, the house reverts to your name, and they're required by law to vacate within 30 days. I signed the documents, my hand steady. Each stroke of the pen felt like a nail in the coffin of the abuse I had endured. When we stepped into the filing office and the clerk stamped the packet, I felt lighter, like I had exhaled a weight I'd carried for years. We walked outside, and I looked up at the sky, cloudy gray but open. Free. Lisa handed me an envelope with copies. This is your new foundation, she said. It stated that due to material neglect and breach of the conditions outlined in the original deed transfer, ownership was reverting back to me. They had 72 hours to vacate the premises. I watched from my chair as Brandon came home that afternoon, his face brightening as he threw open the door like he was stepping into a victory party. Michelle followed, juggling bags and phones, still unaware of the message waiting for them. I gestured to the envelope. You might want to see this, I said calmly. Brandon's expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed, the smile slipping off his face. Michelle's jaw tightened as she grabbed the letter and unfolded it slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Brandon's voice cracked. This is a joke. Michelle's fingers trembled as she reread the paragraphs. You can't be serious. I nodded, standing slowly. I am. The lawyer confirmed everything. The judge signed off. The room seemed to shrink as the weight of reality settled in. I noticed how Brandon's hands clenched the letter, knuckles whitening. You're bluffing, he spat. You wouldn't dare. I shook my head. I've been patient too long. This house belongs to me. The home I gave you as a gift, yes, but with conditions you failed to meet. Michelle sat down abruptly, her eyes wet. Dad, please, she said, voice cracking. We can work this out. We can change. We're sorry. I folded my arms. Sorry doesn't undo the weeks of neglect, the locking me in my room, the lies to the police. Brandon paced. Where are we supposed to go? Rent is insane. We have nowhere else. I looked at them both, my heart heavy but firm. That's not my problem anymore. You chose this path. The silence stretched. Then Michelle whispered, We'll find a way. You have 72 hours, I said evenly. I watched as the facade crumbled before me. The arrogance, the entitlement, the casual cruelty replaced by panic, uncertainty, and fear. The next few hours were a whirlwind of calls, packing, and whispered arguments. Brandon asked me if I'd reconsider. Michelle begged me for more time. I stood firm. I'd waited too long for respect. At night, I lay in bed, hearing the sounds of hurried packing and muffled sobs. The house was quieter than it had been in weeks, but the quiet was different, tense, charged, like the calm before a storm's final blow. On the third day, I heard the door shut behind them with a definitive click. I sat in the living room, the letters still on the table, the air thick with absence. I was alone, truly alone in my home for the first time in years. And the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the walls, the memories etched into every corner. I thought of Esther, of the sacrifices we made, and I felt a deep peace. I was home again. The next morning, I called Lisa. "It's done," I said softly. After the last box was carried out and the front door shut with that definitive finality, I stood alone in the silence that had settled over the house like a heavy blanket. It was a quiet I had not known in years, a quiet that was both comforting and unsettling. I wandered from room to room, touching the worn edges of furniture and walls that bore the marks of a lifetime of memories. The kitchen counters still held a few scattered items left behind in haste, the scent of faint lemon cleaner mingling with a mustiness that comes from long absences. I sat in the living room chair, the same one where I had first asked for water and been met with scorn, and let the weight of it all sink in. It was strange how something so familiar could feel so foreign at the same time. I thought of Esther and the dreams we had shared, the life we had built together, and the family I had trusted to honor that legacy. For years, I had carried the burden of caring for them, putting their needs before my own, sacrificing my comfort and sometimes my dignity, believing that love was enough to hold us together. But love without respect is a fragile thing, and I've been blind to that truth for too long. The emptiness in this house was now filled with a new kind of hope, a hope for healing, for rebuilding, for setting boundaries that had never been established before. I pulled out the old folder with the insurance papers and the documents Esther had kept safe. I traced my finger over the dates and the signatures, remembering how that money had been meant to provide security for all of us. That security had been threatened, but it was not lost. I knew that this was just the beginning. The legal battle was won, but the emotional one was far from over. I had to forgive, not for their sake, but for my own peace. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting or excusing. It meant releasing the grip of anger so I could move forward without bitterness. I called Lisa again and told her I wanted to start putting my affairs in order, not just the house, but my life. She agreed to help me draft new documents that would protect me in the future, setting clear terms and conditions so that what happened could never happen again. As the days passed, neighbors came by with quiet condolences and offers of help, their faces showing a mixture of surprise and sympathy. Some admitted they had noticed the tension but didn't know how to intervene. It was humbling to realize how isolated I had become in the very community I had helped build. I accepted their kindness with gratitude, though I also understood that true healing would come from within. I started to spend more time in the garden, slowly replanting some of Esther's favorite flowers, taking small steps toward restoring the home she loved. The soil felt rich beneath my fingers, and with each seed planted, I felt a measure of renewal. I began attending a local senior group, reconnecting with friends and making new ones. Sharing my story, listening to theirs, reminded me that I was not alone and that dignity and respect are battles fought every day by many. One afternoon, Joshua stopped by with a freshly baked pie and a warm smile. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I smiled back. "Better, thanks to you. You taught me a lot about strength," he said. Sometimes it's not about muscle or age, but about knowing when to stand up and when to reach out. We sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. For the first time in a long while, I felt a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. I realized that this house was more than bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to endurance, and the power of reclaiming one's own story. I wasn't just Walter Granger, the retired engineer or the man who had lost his family's trust. I was a man who had found his voice again and was ready to live the rest of his days with dignity, kindness, and self-respect. And in that quiet reflection, I found peace. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains as I woke in my own bed, a bed that had always belonged to me, but had felt foreign for too long. The house was quiet, peaceful, and filled with a sense of new possibility. As I rose slowly, feeling the familiar ache of my healing body, I was struck not by loneliness, but by a quiet strength that had taken root deep within me. The past weeks had been a storm of pain, betrayal, and hardship, but they had also been a journey, a path through darkness toward a clearer understanding of what it truly means to claim one's life and dignity. I thought back to Esther, her warm smile, the way she had nurtured our family, and I realized that the legacy she left was not just a house or money, but a lesson in resilience and love. It was my responsibility now to live that lesson fully, not only for myself, but for the memory of all we had shared. The legal battle was behind me, the eviction final, but the true work had only just begun. I spent the morning walking through the rooms, touching the walls, the furniture, the very fabric of this home. It felt like a sacred place again, not because of grandeur, but because it was mine, reclaimed by will and law and the courage to stand firm. I knew I could never erase the wounds left by Brandon and Michelle, nor the scars they had inflicted on my heart, but I could choose how to carry those scars. I could carry them as reminders of pain or as badges of survival and strength. I chose the latter. I decided to invite neighbors and friends over, not just for tea or conversation, but to build a community that valued respect and kindness. I reached out to local support groups, senior centers, and even started volunteering to share my story, hoping that others who felt silenced or powerless might find encouragement in my journey. Forgiveness was the hardest part, not because I wanted to forget or accept the wrongs done to me, but because I needed to release their hold on my spirit. I wrote letters I never sent, spoke aloud to the empty rooms, and slowly, over time, the anger softened. I learned that forgiveness was not a gift to those who hurt me, but a gift to myself, a key to unlocking peace. One afternoon, Joshua came by with a basket of fresh vegetables from his garden. "You're doing better," he said quietly. "I can see it." I smiled, the weight in my chest lighter than it had been in months. "It's a new beginning," I replied. One built not on the past, but on the strength to move forward. As spring turned to summer, the house bloomed with new life. Flowers I planted, laughter from friends, quiet moments of reflection. I learned to embrace the slow rhythm of healing, both body and soul, knowing that time could not erase history, but could shape the future. I no longer feared growing old or facing challenges alone. I had discovered a reserve of courage and self-respect that even the darkest days could not extinguish. In the stillness of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the garden, I sat on the porch and breathed deeply. The house stood strong, a testament not just to bricks and mortar, but to the unyielding spirit of a man who refused to be broken. My story was no longer one of loss, but of redemption. I was Walter D. Granger, not just a survivor, but a man reclaimed. And in that reclamation, I found peace. If this story has touched you, remember that strength is not measured by the battles you avoid, but by the courage to face them. Life will test us all, but with patience, love, and unwavering belief in ourselves, we can reclaim what is rightfully ours: our dignity, our voice, and our home. The end. If you found my story meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to support more stories like mine. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of the story resonated most with you? And where are you watching from? Share your impressions and your own experiences in the comments below. Your voices matter, and together we can create a community that values strength, resilience, and respect. Thank you for listening and being part of this journey with me.